Okay, we're live again. Today, on a Tuesday, we're going to keep on reading The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft. And with me is Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas. Good evening.
Hey Pat, it's great to be back. Thanks for
Thank you
listening,
for
guys.
thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone that is going to be watching this live stream or listening to this live stream. I'm going to be posting the link of the story that we're going to have today, and we have the dogs barking in the background. I think that they're just like having this whole mystery behind this story, which is the Call of Cthulhu again. We are going to read today chapter 2, The Tale of Inspector Legros. So, okay, let me first, before anything, start sharing the screen. Okay. So, whenever you want to start, Nicholas.
Sure thing, okay. 2. The Tale of Inspector Legros. Oh, by the way, everyone, this is going to be a cold reading for us, so give us some patience. The older matters which had made the sculptor's dream and bas relief so significant to my uncle formed the subject of the second half of his long manuscript. Once before, it appears, Professor Angell had seen the hellish outlines of the nameless monstrosity, puzzled over the unknown hieroglyphics, and heard the ominous symbols, which can be rendered only as Cthulhu, and all this in so stirring and horrible a connection that it is small wonder he pursued young Wilcox with queries and demands for data.
The earlier experience had come in 1908, 17 years before, when the American Archaeological Society held its annual meeting in St. Louis. Professor Engel, as befit one of his authority and attainments, had had a prominent part in all of the deliberations, and was one of the first to be approached by the several outsiders who took advantage of the convocation to offer questions for correct answering and problems for expert solution.
The chief of these outsiders, and in a short time the focus of interest for the entire meeting, was a commonplace looking middle aged man who had traveled all the way from New Orleans for certain special information unobtainable from any local source. His name was John Raymond Legros, and he was by profession an inspector of police. With him, he bore the subject of his visit, a grotesque, repulsive, and apparently very ancient stone statuette whose origin he was at a loss to determine. It must not be fancied that Inspector Legros had the least interest in archaeology. On the contrary, his wish for enlightenment was prompted by purely professional considerations. The statuette, idol, fetish, or whatever it was, had been captured some months before in the wooded swamps south of New Orleans during a raid on a supposed voodoo meeting, and so singular and hideous were the rites connected with it that the police could not but realize that they had stumbled on a dark cult totally unknown to them, and infinitely more diabolic than even the blackest of the African voodoo circles. Of its origin, apart from the erratic and unbelievable tales extorted from the captured members, absolutely nothing was to be discovered. Hence the anxiety of the police for any antiquarian lore which might help them to place the frightful symbol, and through it, track down the cult to its fountainhead.
Inspector Legros was scarcely prepared for the sensation which his offering created. One sight of the thing had been enough to throw the assembled men of science into a state of tense excitement, and they lost no time in crowding around him to gaze at a diminutive figure whose utter strangeness and air of generally abysmal antiquity hinted so potently and unopened an archaic vistas. No recognized school of sculpture had animated this terrible object, yet centuries and even thousands of years seems recorded in its dim and greenish surface of unpleasable stone.
The figure, which was finally passed slowly from man to man for close and careful study, was between 7 and 8 inches in height and of exquisitely artistic workmanship. It represented a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery looking body, prodigious claws on hind and forefeet, and long, narrow wings behind. This thing, which seemed instinct with a fearsome and unnatural malignancy, was of a somewhat bloated corpulence, and squatted evilly on a rectangular block or pedestal covered with indecipherable characters. The tips of the wings touched the back edge of the block. The seat occupied the center, whilst the long, curved claws on the double up, crouching hind legs gripped the front edge and extended a quarter of the way down toward the bottom of the pedestal. The cephalopod's head was bent forward so that the ends of the facial feelers brushed the backs of huge forepaws, which clasped the croucher's elevated knees. The aspect of the whole was abnormally lifelike, and the more subtly fearful because its source was so totally unknown. Its vast, awesome, and incalculable age was unmistakable, yet not one link did it shew with any known type of art belonging to civilization's youth, or indeed to any other time. Totally separate and apart, its very material was a mystery for the soapy, greenish black stone, with its golden or iridescent flecks and striations resembled nothing familiar to geology or mineralogy. The characters along the base were equally baffling, and no member present, despite a representation of half the world's expertly learning in this field, could form the least notion of even their remotest linguistic kinship. They, like the subject and material, belonged to something horribly remote and distinct from mankind as we know it. Something frightfully suggestive of old and unhallowed cycles of life in which our world and our conceptions have no part.
And yet, as the members severely shook their heads and confessed defeat at the inspector's problem, there was one man in that gathering who suspected a touch of bizarre familiarity in the monstrous shape and writing, and who presently told with some diffidence of the odd trifle he knew. This person was the late William Channing Webb, professor of anthropology in Princeton University, and an explorer of no slight note. Professor Webb had been engaged 48 years before in a tour of Greenland and Iceland in search of some runic inscriptions which he failed to unearth, and whilst high up on the West Greenland coast had encountered a singular tribe or cult of degenerate Eskimos, whose religion, a curious form of devil worship, chilled him with its deliberate bloodthirstiness and repulsiveness. It was a fate of which other Eskimos knew little, and which they mentioned only with shudders, saying that it had come down from horribly ancient eons before ever the world was made. Besides nameless rites and human sacrifices, there were certain queer hereditary rituals addressed to a supreme elder devil or Tornosak, and of this Professor Webb had taken a careful phonetic copy from an aged Angakok, or wizard priest, expressing the sounds in Roman letters as best he knew how. But just now, of prime significance was the fetish which this cult had cherished, and around which they danced when the aurora leaped high over the ice cliffs. It was, the professor stated, a very crude bas relief of stone, comprising the hideous picture of some cryptic writing, and so far as he could tell, it was a rough parallel in all essential features of the bestial thing now lying before the meeting.
This data, received with suspense and astonishment by the assembled members, proved doubly exciting to Inspector Legras, and he began at once to ply his informant with questions. Having noted and copied an oral ritual among the swamp cult worshippers his men had arrested, he besought the professor to remember as best he might the syllables taken down amongst the diabolist
Diabolist.
Eskimo. There then followed an exhaustive comparison of details, and a moment of really awed silence when both detective and scientist agreed on the virtual identity of the phrase common to two hellish rituals so many worlds of distance apart. What, in substance, both Eskimo wizards and Louisiana swamp priests had chanted to their kindred idols was something very like this, the word divisions being guessed at from traditional breaks in the phrase as chanted aloud.
Wow.
I could read it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fing Louis McNuff, Cthulhu, Yay, Wuknal, Fatang.
Wow.
That's good enough.
Wow.
Good enough.
Yeah, I think that was really good. I wouldn't have even know how to read this. Okay, let me read this one. Legras had one point in advance of Professor Webb, for several among his mongrel prisoners had repeated to him what older celebrants had told them the words meant. This text, as given, runs something like this.
In the house of Leia, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming.
And now, in response to a general and urgent demand, Inspector Legras related as fully as possible his experience with the swamp worshippers, telling a story to which I could see my uncle attach profound significance. It savored of the wildest dreams of myth-maker and theophilist, and disclosed an astonishing degree of cosmic imagination among such half-castes and Paris
Pariahs.
as pariahs as might be least expected to possess it.
On November 1st, 1907, there had come to the New Orleans police a frantic summons from the swamp and lagoon country to the south. The squatters there, mostly primitive but good-natured descendants of Lafayette's man, were in the grip of stark terror from an unknown thing which had stolen upon them in the night. It was voodoo, apparently, but voodoo of a more terrible sort than they had ever known, and some of their women and children had disappeared since the malevolent tom-tom had begun its incessant beating far within the black haunted woods, where no dweller ventured. There were insane shouts and harrowing screams, soul-chilling chants, and dancing devil flames. And the frightened messenger added, the people could stand no more.
So a body of 20 police, filling two carriage and an automobile, had set out in the late afternoon with the shivering squatter as a guide. At the end of the passable road they aligned, and for miles splashed on in silence through the terrible cypress woods where day never came. Ugly roots and malignant hanging noses of Spanish moss beset them, and now and then a pile of dank stones or fragment of a rotting wall intensified by its hint of morbid habitation, a depression which every malformed tree and every fungus islet combined to create. At length the squatters' settlement, a miserable huddle of huts, hove in sight, and hysterical dwellers ran out to cluster around the group of bobbing lanterns. The muffled beat of tom-toms was now faintly audible far, far ahead, and a curdling shriek came at infrequent intervals when the wind shifted. A reddish glare, too, seemed to filter through the pale undergrowth beyond endless avenues of forest night. Reluctant even to be left alone again, Each one of the cowed squatters refused point blank to advance another inch toward the scene of unholy worship. So Inspector Legros and his 19 colleagues plunged on guide into black arcades of horror that none of them had ever trod before.
The region now entered by the police was one of traditionally evil repute, substantially unknown and untraversed by white men. There were legends of a hidden lake unglimpsed by mortal sight, in which dwelt a huge, formless, white polypus thing with luminous eyes, and squatters whispered that bat-winged devils flew up out of caverns in inner earth to worship it at midnight. They said it had been there before Dilberville, Dilberville,
Mhm.
before LaSalle, before the Indians, and before even the wholesome beasts and birds of the woods. It was nightmare itself, and to see it was to die. But it made men dream, and so they knew enough to keep away. The present voodoo orgy was, indeed, on the merest fringe of this abhorrent area. But that location was bad enough. Hence, perhaps the very place of the worship had terrified the squatters more than the shocking sounds and incidents.
Only poetry or madness could do justice to the noises heard by Legras's men as they plunged on through the black morass towards the red glare and the muffled tom-toms. There are vocal qualities peculiar to men, and vocal qualities peculiar to beasts. And it is terrible to hear that one when the source should yield the other. Animal fury and orgiastic license here whipped themselves to daem- demonic demoniac hates by howls and squawking ecstasies that tore and reverberate through those nightly woods like pesti- pestilential tempests from the gulfs of hell. Now and then the less organized ululation will cease, and from what seems a well-drilled chorus of hoarse voices will rise in sing-song chant and hideous phrase or ritual. Oh my god, again.
Finglui Magnaf Tulu Relay Wakanya Fatang.
Wow. Oh my god, I will have to knock on wood just to make sure that nothing is behind me.
We quieted the dogs down. That's ironic.
Yeah, the dogs were just quiet. I think they were just listening to that. Wow. Okay, then the men, having reached a spot where the trees were thinner, came suddenly in sight of the spectacle itself. Four of them reeled, one fainted, and two were shaken into a frantic cry, which the mad cacophony of the orgy fortunately deadened. Legras dashed swamp water on the face of the fainting man, and all stood trembling and nearly hypnotized with horror.
In a natural glade of the swamp stood a grassy island of perhaps an acre's extent, clear of trees and tolerably dry. On this now leaped and twisted a more indescribable horde of human abnormality than any but a sime or an angarola could paint. Void of clothing, this hybrid spawn were braying, bellowing, and writhing about a monstrous ring-shaped bonfire, in the center of which, revealed by occasional rifts in the curtain of flame, stood a great granite monolith some 8 feet in height, on top of which, incongruous with its diminutiveness, rested the noxious carven statuette. From a wide circle of 10 scaffolds set up at regular intervals, with the flame-girt monolith as a center hung, head downward, the oddly marred bodies of the helpless squatters who had disappeared. It was inside this circle that the ring of worshippers jumped and roared, and general direction of the mass motion being from left to right in endless bacchanal between the ring of bodies and the ring of fire.
It may have been only imagination, and it may have been only echoes, which induced One of the men, an excitable Spaniard, to fancy he heard antiphonal responses to the ritual from some far and illuminate spot deeper within the wood of ancient legendary and horror. This man, Joseph D. Galvez, uh, I later met and questioned. He proved distractingly imaginative. He indeed went so far as to hint of the faint beating of great wings, and of a glimpse of shining eyes, and a mountainous white bulk beyond the remotest trees. But I suppose he had been hearing too much native superstition.
Actually, the horrified pause of the men was of comparatively brief duration. Duty came first, and although there must have been nearly 100 mongrel celebrants in the throng, the police relied on their firearms and plunged determinedly into the nauseous rout. For 5 minutes, the resultant din and chaos were beyond description. Wild blows were struck, shots were fired, and escapes were made. But in the end, Legras was able to count some 47 sullen prisoners, whom he forced to dress in haste and fall into line between two rows of policemen. 5 of the worshippers lay dead, and 2 severely wounded ones were carried away on improvised stretchers by their fellow prisoners. The image on the monolith, of course, was carefully removed and carried back by Legras.
Examined at headquarters after a trip of intense strain and weariness, the prisoners all proved to be men of a very low, mixed blooded, and mentally aberrant type. Most were seamen, and a sprinkling of Negroes and mulattoes, largely West Indians or Brava Portuguese from the Cape Verde island, gave a coloring of Buddhism to the heterogeneous cult. But before many questions were asked, it became manifest that something far deeper and older than Negro fetishism was involved. Degraded and ignorant as they were, the creatures held with surprising consistency to the central idea of their loathsome fate.
They worshipped, so they said, the great old ones, who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies had told their secrets in dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world until the time when the great priest Cthulhu, from his dark house in the mighty city of Roulette, under the waters, should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Some day he would call, when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him.
Meanwhile, no more must be told. There was a secret which even torture could not extract. Mankind was not absolutely alone among the conscious things of earth, for shapes came out of the dark to visit the faithful few. But these were not the great old ones. No man had ever seen the old ones. The carven idol was the great Cthulhu, but none might say whether or not the others were precisely like him. No one could read the old writing now, but things were told by word or of mouth. The chanted ritual was not the secret, that was never spoken aloud, only whispered. The chant meant only this. In his house at Relia, death Cthulhu awaits, dreaming.
Only 2 of the prisoners were found sane enough to be hanged, and the rest were committed to the various institutions. All denied a part in the ritual murders, and averred that the killing had been done by black-winged ones which had come to them from their immemorial meeting place in the haunted wood. But of those mysterious allies no coherent account could ever be gained. What the police did extract came mainly from an immensely aged mestizo
Mhm.
named Castro, who claimed to have sailed to strange ports and talked with undying leaders of the cult in the mountains of China.
Old Castro remembered bits of hideous legend that paled the speculations of theosophists and made man and the world seem recent and transient indeed. There had been aeons when other things ruled on the earth, and they had had great cities. Remains of them, he said the deathless Chinaman had told him, were still to be found as cyclopean stones of Iceland in the Pacific. They all died vast epochs of time before men came. But there were arts which could revive them when the stars had come round again to the right positions in the cycle of eternity. They had, indeed, come themselves from the stars and brought their images with them.
These great old ones, Castro continued, were not composed altogether of flesh and blood. They had shape, for did not this star-fashioned image prove it? But that shape was not made of matter. When the stars were right, they could plunge from world to world through the sky. But when the stars were wrong, they could not live. But although they no longer lived, they would never really die. They all lay in stone houses in their great city, Lay, preserved by the spells of mighty Cthulhu for a glorious resurrection when the stars and the earth might once more be ready for them. But at that time, some force from outside must serve to liberate their bodies. The spells that preserved them intact likewise prevented them from making an initial move, and they could only lie awake in the dark and think whilst uncounted millions of years rolled by. They knew all that was occurring in the universe, but their mode of speech was transmitted thought. Even now they talked in their tombs. When, after infinities of chaos, the men came, the great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by molding their dreams, for only thus could their language reach the fleshly minds of mammals.
Then, whispered Castro, those first men formed a cult around small idols which the great ones showed them. Idols brought in dim areas from dark stars. Iris from dark stars. That cult will never die till the stars came right again, and the secret priests will take great Cthulhu from his tomb to revive his subjects and resume his rule on earth. The time will be easy to know, for then mankind would have become as the great old ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated old ones will teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth will flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. Meanwhile the cult, by appropriate rites, must keep alive the memory of those ancient ways and shadow forth the prophecy of their return.
In the elder time, chosen men had talked with the entombed old ones in dreams. But then something had happened. The great stone city, Relay, with its monoliths and sepulchres, had sunk beneath the waves and the deep waters, full of the one primal mystery through which not even thought can pass, had cut off the spectral intercourse. But memory never died, and high priests said that the city would rise again when the stars were right. Then came out of the earth the black spirits of earth, moldy and shadowy, and full of dim rumors, picked up in caverns beneath forgotten sea bottoms. But of them old Castro dared not speak much. He cut himself off hurriedly, and no amount of persuasion or subtlety could elicit more in this direction. The size of the old ones, too, he curiously declined to mention. Of the cult, He said that he thought the center lay amid the pathless deserts of Arabia, where Iram, the city of pillars, dreams hidden and untouched. It was not allied to the European witch cult and was virtually unknown beyond its members. No book had ever really hinted of it, though the deathless Chinaman said that there were double meanings in the Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazarad, which the initiated might read as they chose, especially the much discussed couplet.
That is not that which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die.
Legras, deeply impressed and not a little bewildered, had inquired Avain concerning the historic affiliations of the cult. Castro apparently had told the truth when he said that it was wholly secret. The authorities of Tulane University could shed no light upon either cult or image, and now the detective had come to the highest authorities in the country and met with no more than the Greenland tale of Professor Webb.
The feverish interest aroused at the meeting by Legras' tale, corroborated as it was by the statuette, is echoed in the subsequent correspondence of those who attended, although scant mentions occur in the formal publications of the society. Caution is the first care of those accustomed to face occasional charlatanry and imposture. Legras for some time lent the image to Professor Webb, but at the latter's death it was returned to him and remains in his possession, where I viewed it not long ago. It is truly a terrible thing, and unmistakably akin of the dreams culture of young Wilcox.
That my uncle was excited by the tale of the sculptor, I did not wonder. For what thoughts must arise upon hearing, after a knowledge of what Legras had learned of the cult, of a sensitive young man who had dreamed not only the figure and exact hieroglyphics of the swamp found image and the Greenland devil tablet, but had come in his dreams upon at least three of the precise words of the formula uttered alike by Eskimo diabolists and mongrel Louisianans. Professor Angle's instant start on an investigation of the uttermost thoroughness was eminently natural, though privately I suspected young Wilcox of having heard of the cult in some indirect way, and of having invented a series of dreams to heighten and continue the mystery at my uncle's expense. The dream narratives and cuttings collected by the professor were, of course, strong corroboration, but the rationalism of my mind and the extravagance of the whole subject led me to adopt what I thought the most sensible of conclusions. So, after thoroughly studying the manuscript again and correlating the theosophical and anthropological notes with the cult narrative of Legras, I made a trip to Providence to see the sculptor and give him the rebuke I thought proper for so boldly imposing upon a learned and aged man.
Wilcox still lived alone in the Fleur de Lis building in Thomas Street, a hideous Victorian imitation of 17th century Breton architecture, which flaunts its stuccoed front amidst the lovely colonial houses of the ancient hill, and under the very shadow of the finest Georgian steeple in America. I found him at work in his rooms, and at once conceded from the specimens scattered about that his genius is indeed profound and authentic. He will, I believe, sometime be heard from as one of the great decadents, for he has crystallized in clay and will one day mirror in marble those nightmares and fantasies, which Arthur McCann evokes in prose, and Clark Ashton Smith makes visible in verse and in painting.
Dark, frail, and somewhat unkempt in aspect. He turned languidly at my knock and asked me my business without rising. When I told him who I was, he displayed some interest, for my uncle had excited his curiosity in probing his strange dreams, yet had never explained the reason for his study. I did not enlarge his knowledge in this regard, but sought with some subtlety to draw him out. In a short time, I became convinced of his absolute sincerity, for he spoke of the dreams in a manner none could mistake. They and their subconscious residuum had influenced his art profoundly, and he shewed me a morbid statue whose contours almost made me shake with the potency of its black suggestion. He could not recall having seen the original of this thing except in his own dream bas relief, but the outlines had formed themselves insensibly under his hands. It was, no doubt, the giant shape he had raved of in delirium. That he really knew nothing of the hidden call, save from what my uncle's relentless catechism had let fall, he soon made clear. And again I strove to think of some way in which he could possibly have received the weird impressions.
He talked of his dreams in a strangely poetic fashion, making me see with terrible vividness the damp cyclopean city of slimy green stone, whose geometry, he oddly said, was all wrong. And here with frightened expectancy the ceaseless, half mental, calling from underground, Cthulhu Fatang, Cthulhu Fatang. These words had formed part of that dread ritual which told of dead Cthulhu's dream vigil in his stone bald at Riley, and I felt deeply moved despite my rational beliefs. Wilcox, I was sure, had heard of the cult in some casual way, and had soon forgotten it amidst the mass of his equally weird reading and imagining. Later, by virtue of this sheer impressiveness, it had found a subconscious expression in dreams, in the bas relief, and in the terrible statue I now beheld, so that his imposture upon my uncle had been a very innocent one. The youth was of a type, at once slightly affected and slightly ill mannered, which I could never like, but I was to willing enough now to admit both his genius and his honesty. I took leave of him amicably and wished him all the success his talent promises.
The matter of the cult still remained to fascinate me, and at times I had visions of personal fame from researches into its origin and connections. I visited New Orleans, talked to Legras and others of that old time raiding party, saw the frightful image, and even questioned such of the mongrel prisoners as still survived. Old Castro, unfortunately, had been dead for some years. What I now heard so graphically at first hand, though it was really no more than a detailed confirmation of what my uncle had written, excited me afresh. For I felt sure that I was on the track of a very real, very secret, and very ancient religion whose discovery would make me an anthropologist of note. My attitude was still one of absolute materialism, as I wish it still were, and I discounted with almost inexplicable perversity the coincidence of the dream notes and odd cuttings collected by Professor Angle.
One thing I begin to suspect, and which I now fear I know, is that my uncle's death was far from natural. He fell on a narrow hill street leading up from an ancient waterfront, swarming with foreign mongrels, after a careless push from a Negro sailor. I did not forget the mixed blood and marine pursuits of the cult members in Louisiana, and will not be surprised to learn of secret methods and poison needles as ruthless and as unsight anciently known as the cryptic rites and beliefs. Legras and his men, it is true, have been let alone, but in Norway a certain seaman who saw things is dead. Might not the deeper inquiries of my uncle after encountering the sculpture's data have come to sinister ears? I think Professor Engel died because he knew too much, or because he was likely to learn too much. Whether I shall go as he did remains to be seen, for I have learned much now.
Oh wow. Okay, that was really really good.
I think this is a whole new aspect of Lovecraft that we didn't know about,
Yeah.
because having an entire paragraph explaining just that figure and how it looked like, and
Hmm.
I understand now why people will, I mean, will take that specific description as the image that we have all around of
Yes.
how Cthulhu is.
Yep.
I mean, I truly understand the perversity of his words. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
just
Yep.
just being really perverse just to like give something to the crowd is like, okay, you really want something from me because you have never ever have anything from my imagination. Let's say now you have it all.
Yeah,
This is it.
I have to totally take back. I said a few times earlier that I thought that visual depictions probably went against what he was going for because they should be indescribable. But
Mm-hmm.
he really gave us the image here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the description was wonderful. The references were great. For educated people, like he's making a lot of references that I have no idea, like talking about specific artists and things, and
Oh,
forms of
he had
architecture.
lots of that. He had
Yeah.
lots of that. But I think that he have recollect this. This is like one of his true, I don't know, investigated long short story, because it is a short story, but it's like a
Hmm.
really long one since the ones that we have been reading. But I think this takes all of what he has been reading in his entire life, and he placed it here, just like a little bit of gold
Yeah. Yeah.
in this short story.
And it's so original. I really don't know any other reference to like this idea of this underworld cyclopean city of this sleeping giant those things are so amazing. Like
Mhm.
there's such good story.
Mhm.
The idea that you have to. Sorry, am I breaking up?
Yeah, I think it seems to.
Okay, am I back yet?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, yeah. The idea of inviting evil in is an old idea, but it's really good, and he mixes it so well with this ancient city, these huge monoliths, speaking through dreams, the alignment of the stars, and connecting it to these old religions. This combination is really impressive. I have to say that this chapter puts it over the top for me. I
Hmm.
really loved Herbert West Reanimator, but this I think is going to be my new favorite.
I think this is a complete, as I said, this is a complete different way to see Lovecraft stories, because this is something that this is not even like, as I said, Herbert West was just like a running for your life story that you have to have everything, right?
Hmm.
And in this case, he's being really like he's slowly telling us the story. He is
Yeah,
not running, he's not rushing. He is trying to make himself like just telling the story. And I was reading that there is exactly three narrators here. You have the narrator, the one that will give you the sense of knowledge of what's going on, the sides of Legros,
okay.
and from the sculpture point of view. And let's say that I think that Legros in this case is a little bit more profound into investigating something that wanted to be true. The sculpture, on the other hand, for me, it's more than this is my dream. I don't know if it's true or not, but this is what I'm presenting. And the narrator is just like, okay, I am really looking forward on understanding what's going on, but I know that everything it's still unveiling. Like I'm walking every step of the way. I'm getting more information, so I'm not quite sure of what am I going to find next. So that's what I'm like. I have three different perspectives in the same story.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight in that through these different characters, we see these different aspects of this investigation or this mystery. We have
Mm-hmm.
the aesthetic through the artist, the sculptor. We have the sort of warrior that's trying to protect people, which is
Mm-hmm.
the inspector, and then we have sort of the loyal family member who's investigating what the wrong that happened to his uncle, right? Is it
Yeah,
uncle?
yeah, and let's say that that's like the narrator, the first one
Right.
that it's
Yeah.
telling us the story. But I was really shocked on what Legras was finding. Like, and again, it was mixed with Spaniards and Negroes,
Right. Yeah.
mulattoes as well. So I think again, xenophobia here, xenophobic ways of Lovecraft to present this in the story was quite
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Again.
I was thinking that this story would have been more powerful in a time where people were more tribalistic and they were against miscegenation like that.
Hmm.
When they had those ideas, this would have really scared them and spoke to them more. I think in our present time, it's a little bit lost.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But time changes, right?
Yeah.
So that's why. Um, what else? I'm guessing that at that time, the cults and Buddhism was really popular, might
Oh
have been
yeah.
really popular. So that's why he's bringing it up.
Yeah. Especially around Louisiana. Yeah. Definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if as we talked before, I'm still thinking that this octopus character, this Cthulhu.
Hmm.
Um, I wonder what he actually thought of it when he sat down to write the short story. I wonder if he thought it at that moment, or did he had it already in his own dream, and that's why
Yeah. Yeah.
he wanted to like to portray this monster into this short story, or this is the normal monster that he had in mind every time that he's writing his short stories, like horror short stories. And in this one particular, he decided to portray it at last.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to learn how he came up with this. And
Mhm.
I think there's definitely hints of this idea that some people, I would say that being an artist, you deal with a lot of unarticulated knowledge, to borrow a phrase from Jordan Peterson, where you know things, but you don't really have them organized in your mind.
Mhm.
And so things just sort of speak to you in a way that you can't describe, in a similar way that you would have an instinct about someone. You
Yeah.
might meet somebody and you might be like, well, they're saying all the right things, but something about them gives me a really bad feeling, something you can't put your finger on, but
Yeah.
uh, and so, yeah, I really like that he plays with that these sort of instincts that artists and spiritualists and religious mystics would all be very familiar with, are is actually got this secret truth. And I found it very interesting that he was capitalizing the theys and the theirs and stuff like that,
Mhm.
giving these creatures a special status of godhood. Uh,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
because they were talking like a complete different. I am going to say anti-religion, and I'm sorry if
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't want to offend anyone. By the way, this is we have always placed this disclaimer. This is not something that we believe that it's
Of
happening or
course,
that
yeah.
it's already in the world. This is something fictional. This is something out of a short story. Lovecraft have written. It was like 1928, right? I don't remember.
I think that's right. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, yeah. So this is a really old short story. But what I was going to say is that I think this is like an anti-religion, right? Because they're talking something about like bringing them into life, and they will show them how to kill and how to enjoy and how to, it's like this, what we have seen in the Bible, that they were talking about worshiping a beast and having all of these orgies and,
Sure. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's parties like,
Yeah. It really is a sort of an anti-religion in the sense that it plays off of a lot of religious aspects, but it inverts them in a sort of
exactly.
satanic way. Yeah.
And
Where
they're using all of the thems and theirs, just like we use like in the Bible and
yeah.
for Jesus and the Lord, but in their own way, twisted way.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas usually the idea would be God would bring a golden age of peace and wisdom and prosperity and goodness.
Mm-hmm.
This is this sort of insane period of orgies and people degenerating into animals and being insane and killing each other and things. That just eternal
Exactly.
war. Yeah, it is really nicely done. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's it's pretty interesting how he, or how Lovecraft told the story from this cult that they found. And I wanted to read it again because I think I missed a couple of things, because they enter somewhere, right? And they found this cult being done, and it seems like all of them were possessed. And I think they were all put into jail, I think, and
Uh,
there were different things happening to them.
There was just a few that were considered sane enough to be guilty. The rest were put in institutions, so they're put in sanatoriums, like insane
Yeah, but
asylums.
all of them were um they were guilty to that. But the
Well,
thing is that one
but
of them were
legally
insane.
insane though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me
yeah.
try and get.
Sure. While you're looking
Uh-huh.
that up, I will just comment that I felt like the language was a lot better crafted in this chapter particularly. I
Mhm.
don't want to look down on Lovecraft. I mean, he's achieved more than I have, that's for sure. But often when I'm reading his work, I'm sort of chuckling in the back of my head, thinking, you could use an editor. Like there was that one line about the corpulent corpse. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just felt he did a much better job. He's got great alliteration, much better description here. So much less of that indescribable or unnameable
Mhm.
stuff.
He
Uh,
had a
yeah.
couple of lines with that in
Hmm.
Undescribable,
Yeah, yeah.
but only like in this chapter, which is like really long.
Hmm.
Uh-huh. And I wanted to like quote from what you said, the corpulent corpse. I think he was um it was a mistake, but I think he was trying to force that it was a corpse, just like reinforcing it, I guess.
Reinforce it. Sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, maybe, but that in the wrong sense.
yeah, yeah. I think it was a
In the
it
wrong
was a
sense.
poor choice. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
understand. Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, but this one, I think in this part you can tell that he has a really rich vocabulary, because for
yeah.
me at least it's been difficult to try to take some of the words and try to pronounce them.
Hmm.
I'm sorry about that, by the way, but I can tell that there is so much definitions here that at least for me, I will have to search, but it has so much essence to bring this up, and I'm guessing that the people are really educated and knows, and that will know all of the quotes that he's using. They will feel like really satisfied by knowing
Yeah,
that he
yeah,
has been using so many of those
yeah.
into this chapter.
Yeah, there's two kinds of vocabulary. There's sort of a known vocabulary and an active vocabulary,
Mm-hmm.
and that I have an extremely large vocabulary, both active and known. But the active vocabulary, the vocabulary he's using in the story, it really outpaces me. It's really impressive. And again, I've pointed this out before, but I want to point it out again that
Mm-hmm.
this is a much greater accomplishment in his time because I have all kinds of online things that I can reference that
Mm-hmm.
really sort of I've got technology that really enriches what I can use in my active vocabulary. It sort of
Of
reminds me of
course.
things and research. And this is like he may have had some thesauruses around, but that takes time. This is a huge accomplishment to be able to use such a rich, diverse vocabulary in his work, and
I would
appropriately too.
I would imagine him sitting down in a vast library, just sitting down like with a table in the middle of all of these books and reading and trying to like take a pen or a pencil and trying to write things down and put little papers around and then mixing it up just to read what's this, you know? And as I said, I have been reading all like different stories, different short stories, but nothing like Lovecraft, to be honest. Nothing like him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I liked Lovecraft with Herbert West Reanimator, but I think he's really gained my respect with this chapter here.
Yeah, I think, well, as I said, I think Herbert West was one of his best short stories when he started, which was what something that, at least for me, it just gave him um, something to work with because they already have like 3 movies. But with this one, I think he took like the jackpot if it was in his time. It's so bad it didn't, that now everyone is using it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I really think that this is like just winning the jackpot, to be honest.
Yeah. This is quite a magnum opus. That's right.
And you can get a lot of story out of them. I mean, I wonder what kind of storyline they use, for instance, for the games that they have that are being taken from this story, and how the other, for instance, the mythos, which is the whole book from the Cthulhu and all of these writers that um, that were from Lovecraft's line, or that they liked Lovecraft, decided to create. And I don't know how long that will be, because I have seen a couple of videos in YouTube that are like 22 hours of reading that book. Okay. So I don't think that we will have enough live stream to do that.
For sure, yeah.
But I think that that might be that will be really interesting to read, at least like for our own personal lecture. But just to know what's going on with the other minds when they mix it up with what Lovecraft have left here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that from Dungeons and Dragons that the Illithids, or the, what do they call them, mind eaters or something like that. They, what do they call the mind? I forget what the other name is for them, but yeah, the Illithids there. They look like has been described. They don't usually have wings though. They don't usually have the same amount of claws, but they do speak with telepathy, which is something that they mention here, and they're sort of human sized as well in that.
Okay.
So I would say in that game, it's just sort of inspired by these themes. It's not obviously not being taken and just put into the world.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I don't think any game director or any from the horror type game director have taken something out of the blue or out of like from scratch and just reading it down and that's it. I think they took some stories just like Lovecraft, short stories, and decided to take what's the best of the monsters that he was describing, and this one is one of them. Right.
Well, yeah. Okay, yeah. This was really wonderful. There were a couple things that stood out to me that I didn't think were good word choice, and I didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, where was the insensible line here? So here's an example. He could not recall, but having seen the original of this thing, except in his own dream bas relief, but the outlines had formed themselves insensibly under his hands. I don't know what he means by that. Insensibly under his hands.
What part is it? Probably
It's
like on the end, right?
yeah, it's the paragraph that starts with dark frail.
Oh, okay. I found it.
It says he
Um,
could not recall having seen the original of this thing, except in his own dream bas relief. That makes perfect sense. But the outlines had formed
mhm.
themselves insensibly under his hands. I don't know what that means, to be made insensibly under his hands. And there was a couple word choices there that maybe it's my failing, but I don't know if it means anything.
Hmm. Maybe they're talking about the statue.
Well, yeah, he's talking about the making the sculpture, but what does he
Uh-huh.
mean by they form themselves insensibly under his hands? I don't even know what that means. Like I understand, like insensibly would be like you cannot understand it, or there's no meaning to it, or you can't feel it. You know?
No, maybe he was trying to mention that he it's like he used his hands, but he didn't expect to do that. Like he was just like doing it without thinking,
Right.
or without even following some a certain pattern or any thought in his mind. He was just like moving his hands. For me, I mean, that's what I
Yeah.
can that's why I think it's, but the outlines had formed themselves. It's like they
That
formed themselves, but by the use of my hands.
right.
No,
That all makes sense to me. Yeah, but it's just the use of insensibly there.
yeah, yeah. Maybe he's trying to like do just like the corpulent corpse.
Yeah.
Maybe, but if you take that word out, I think that will make I mean, more sense.
Yeah, exactly, and that's my issue. Is that
Uh
there's a
huh.
couple of places here that he would use a particular word or something, and
Exactly.
it seems
I
like
mean,
almost he's on autopilot, and he should have taken that out.
we know that he definitely needed an editor, but he will
Yeah,
never accept it. So,
yeah, yeah.
well, that's my thought, and
I
that's what.
agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. We have noticed for that really long paragraph and those really long sentences
Yeah. Yeah.
that was really complicated to read. But anyways, that was really something. And well, anything else that you wanted to mention about this second chapter?
Well, something more generally, I could say, or
Hmm.
we could talk about is we both agree that there's a lot of talent here. Uh,
Yeah.
but how much? Because it does have it's steeped in the racism and things like that. I'm no book burner. I'm not saying get rid of it, but I'm wondering how much should it really be promoted? Uh, do you think that this underlying racism and tribalism and fear of the other means that maybe it's not appropriate to be taught in schools?
The thing is that this is promoted in the African cultures. This is promoted in our culture, like in the Spaniard culture, in European culture as well. So there isn't any way possible that you can stop teaching this or showing how it is. Maybe the approach was or should be different, but I mean, this short story, I don't think it will be for kids, for
Hmm.
instance. And it will have someone that has to be educated or at least understanding of what Lovecraft is trying to portray here. But as I said, there isn't any way that you can cut that part out.
Hmm.
I mean, if you're mentioning voodoo, you won't say that it's part of the American culture. It has to come from the African cultures, which we went from. I mean, we came from that part, and from the European culture, and from my culture as well, which is the Spanish one, and that's what I'm guessing that's where Lovecraft took this investigation from.
Right, but they're even beyond, because I think it's a little iffy, like equating them with sort of devil worship and things. That it's some voodoo religion is pretty nasty, but in terms of like the race mixing, at least that he seems to be so against. Like I would wonder. Oh, you know what? I think my answer to the question, if
Hmm.
somebody asked me, would be I would say it should be discussed, and then it should also be discussed with a sidebar saying, this is what he believed, and this is why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that could be it. That could be it. What else? What else? What else could we find from here that we can just rescue?
He hates seafarers like sailors.
It seems to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he have placed them as the bad guys of the story
Yeah.
in two stories now. So
I when I saw that there was the inspector, I went and I double checked the inspector's name from the horror at Red Hook, just to, but that was Malone,
yeah,
and I think he would have done a little better to have the same characters coming through the stories. Like it would have been really interesting if we learned a little bit more about Malone or something uh, from one story, and then we saw him in a different story.
yeah, but I think at that time it would have been difficult
Hmm.
to, to catch someone from one story and to put it into this other story.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would have missed it. When we were reading this chapter, I was thinking, I bet you a lot of people that read this would have never read any of Lovecraft's other work. It's not like it
Exactly.
would be all together for them.
And you will still have to explain the character all over the place, like
Yeah, yeah,
in every single story,
yeah.
because you won't say, okay, and the reference from
Hmm.
the horror at the Red Hook, we have Malone, blah blah blah, right? So I think it's much better to just work with a new character and to be able to tell the story through the short story and to be able to tell how this character is here and to be bringing it from. I mean, if you wanted to do a different series, that would have been awesome
Hmm.
because we knew the character and then we know that he's going to be investigating different things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he had it. I mean, we actually don't know.
Yeah, he may. I think that this, like the Necronomicon, I think this is the first instance that he brings it up, and this idea that it comes from this mad Arab Al Hazarat. I know it's been referenced by other writers, so
Hmm.
I think this idea is probably going to be developed more. And you know what? Maybe him not having these through characters encouraged other writers to develop more. And so what, I want to know more about this thing or that thing. I know the Necronomicon was used in countless work.
Uh huh. Well, I hope so because until now there isn't really good stories. I haven't. I mean, I am not the type of person that will be searching for, um, you know, small authors. Maybe I should be doing that, but I could say that there isn't any story that haven't been written before. So at this time, the stories that Lovecraft is presenting, or in the, I don't know how to explain it, but for me, it's taking the whole world, and it's just presenting us this piece of art. Like this is for you to have, and no one have already thought about it than me. Like, or I have taken certain parts, but I'm getting this for you. That's
Hmm.
how I'm feeling
You
every
really
time
feel like
that I'm.
it's more original than other work that you've read?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and there isn't any new things that we can jump on now that we can say, "Oh my god, this author is the one that we should be reading now." That is alive and it's writing
Uh,
something interesting.
Well, I would say that it was probably a matter of taste, and talking about there never being new stories, I think that might be a matter of perspective. I'm reminded of, uh, I think you used to watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this one episode where Data goes to a world and he's listening to a lecture by a school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She says everything in the world is composed of these four elements, and she talks about these four elements. And he says, "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. I think that you're categorizing things according to superficial characteristics, meaning that the reason why she sees everything as being composed of these four things is she's arbitrarily grouping everything into those four categories." And I don't think that he's wrong, and I don't think that she's wrong. I think they're just different ways of looking at things. Um,
Mm, yeah.
so I don't think that every story has been told, but I don't think you're wrong when you say, it's just it's just the mixing of these old ideas, because I just think that's a different way of looking at it. Superficially, I think you're right. But I think every story is unique in some way.
Yeah, of course, but that's the thing, that it depends on how much you're taking from that other story and how
Mhm.
much you're modifying it into
And
the new
this,
one.
yeah, if we compare Herbert West Reanimator and this is so much more original. Like Herbert West Reanimator, in many ways, felt like a retelling of Frankenstein for me.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's why it was so commercial, and that's why it came into a movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that this is like maybe Lovecraft wanted to show the world that he wanted to take something out of something old and then can create something new. But as you said, I also share with what you said. This is a really good story. I mean, the Call of Cthulhu, an original in the
Yeah.
whole in the whole story itself. I mean, I can tell that I haven't read anything like this before.
Yeah. I think it could be. I don't know. I'm sure it's been adapted to movies before, but I think it could be adapted to a movie plot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be just really good to follow the narrator as he goes through these experiences. And maybe when he's hearing the experience of his others, you could sort of have cutaways and scenes.
I wonder
Uh,
why they didn't do that.
well, they may have. I've never looked it up. I'm sure.
Mhm.
Let's Google it. I'm sure there's a million Call of Cthulhu movies.
Mm.
Yeah, there's at least one in 2005.
But this is like a really old movie. It doesn't seem like
The 2005 one, like the artwork on the cover, I think is meant to look old.
okay.
Uh, oh, I see a black and white one.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
black and
that.
white one, and it's and without any voice.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So it has been done multiple times. That doesn't surprise me at all. But
Why
if
do you want
if
it?
if I were to imagine a movie done by it, I would like to see it follow Nicolas Cage as the narrator.
But it says here that they wanted to make it look like the film was been, um I don't know, created at that time, and that's why they decided to do it in that way, like
Oh,
black and
so the
white.
2005 film is black and white with no sound? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Without sound. Yes. And that's why they decided to do that, because they wanted to make us look like it was made at that time.
Okay. Well, I think that might be just interesting film oddity. I really think that you could tell a modern film, like do a modern film with this story quite well and engagingly.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, we have so much right now. I wonder if in this movie they decided to do something like the Cthulhu description in the short story. I wonder. I really wonder.
I like the hint in this chapter about things getting of his perspective changing. My attitude was still one of absolute materialism, as I wish it still were. I like that. This idea again that just because it's true doesn't mean you want to know it.
Yeah.
That's an interesting theme.
Wow. I think we should try and watch this movie at certain point
Okay, sure. Yeah, we
and
could do it.
see, yeah, and see if, I mean, after we have read this story, and see how much close this movie was to the short story.
Sure. Yep, we could do that. Yeah, I'd be happy to do
Mhm.
that. I have a feeling I'm probably not going to enjoy it too much. I think it seems more like a stylistic thing that somebody would do at a film school, but I don't want to be too judgmental. But we'll
Yeah,
see. Yeah,
we
I look
still,
forward to seeing
yeah. I mean, if we get bored at the first 10 minutes or so, then we can just stop that movie.
it.
The thing is that I wish I could like compare it to this short story to see how much, because they said it was from, let me read it again. It says that it came from the Historical Society from H.P. Lovecraft. So it seems like it was made from the people that really enjoy. I mean, there's like this society created by created for H.P. Lovecraft.
Right.
So I'm guessing that it was from someone or from a group of people that really enjoyed H.P. Lovecraft. So,
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll give it a shot. Sure.
hmm okay. So, is there is anything else that you want to mention?
I can't think of any.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap this up for today. On the next, I mean, at the next weekend, we're going to be reading the next chapter, which is the madness from the sea, and I think that's our last chapter.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for everyone that will be watching this live stream. And if you have watching it until here, please let us know if there is someone that you want us to read or to discuss about. You know, we're open to any suggestions. We are still going to be reading this the next week, and then we're going to decide which other story we want to keep on reading. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
Nicholas, for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This has been great. Thanks for listening, guys.
And please follow Nicholas on his own YouTube channel, Nicholas Cato Strode. He is actually posting now and having lots of new videos for you guys to watch too. So for us, right now, we're just going to say goodbye, good night, and guys, I hope to see you guys soon.
Let me say really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I will be reading H.P. Lovecraft, so I'll be doing audio readings of that work. So if you're specifically interested in H.P. Lovecraft and not interested in all the philosophy and Zen stuff that I've already got done, then keep in mind very soon we're going to have H.P. Lovecraft coming out and some original work by me as well.
That's great. And we'll be able to listen to you on the next videos that you're going to be posting then. Okay, guys, then we're going to see you guys soon.